What did Kirby Smart just say about the Auburn Tigers? That's what we're going to talk about in today's video. I'm, of course, going to share my thoughts on an Auburn team that is probably a little better than what I thought coming into the season. They're coming off two really tough road games at Oklahoma, at Texas A&M. They had the off week last week as they get 2 weeks to prepare for the Georgia Bulldogs. We're going to dig into all of this. I think Georgia is going to win the game. We're going to talk about that all week. But here's what Kirby Smart had to say with his opening statement talking about the Auburn Tigers. He said, quote, "They've got a really good football team. They played two really, really hard road games in our league against two of the premier teams and are playing really well defensively." And he's absolutely correct there. They've got some weapons on defense, and I think Auburn's defense has kept them in a lot of these games, and I think it will keep them in the game when Georgia comes to town. And again, we're going to talk more about that in a second. I said they have a lot of weapons on offense, a lot of great skill position players that do a great job on special teams. I've always respected Coach Freeze's team. They will strike you and hit you and are really physical across the board. You see physicality on tape, and that's the way it is in our league. I mean, it's just week in and week out. You've got to really play, and you're going to play in some tight games. The games they've played, they've been basically one possession games, and it comes down to the wire on the road and in tough road environments, so I give them a lot of credit. And he's right. It looked like they were going to get blown out a couple weeks ago at Texas A&M. They had, some big defensive plays that kept them in that game. There was a late, 80-yard interception return that got them down inside the 5, and they punched it in for a score. But that score, I don't think, indicated how much better Texas A&M was over them. But I thought they really fought hard and got hosed a couple times at Oklahoma. But their offensive line is what is really struggling. And again, we're going to talk about all this and key players in just a second. But first, I want to plug Sales Hatch. Sales Hatch connects businesses and helps small businesses get their foot in the door with others. They're a great sponsor for us. If you've led sales teams before, you know the toughest part isn't exactly closing, but it's simply getting the conversation starting and landing that first meeting. Sales Hatch handles all the cold calling, all the email campaigns, the direct mail, everything needed to consistently put their partners in front of new prospects. They do the dirty work that you either don't want to do or don't know how to do. It is a game changer for small businesses. So if you own one, make sure you are getting in touch with Sales Hatch. They're a great sponsor for us, so make sure you give them a try. So let's talk about key players, right? Guys that need to have a big game if Auburn does want to pull the upset over Georgia. I love their skill position players, and Kirby Smart spoke about that. We're going to talk about Jackson Arnold in a second, but they've got some dudes on the outside. Cam Coleman, one of the best wide receivers in college football. I think he is an NFL guy, easy. Eric Singleton, the crafty, explosive, smaller wide receiver that transferred from Georgia Tech. Georgia fans know all about him. That guy is a playmaker, can make some really tough catches, but he is dangerous after the catch. Malcolm Simmons is a guy I really liked out of high school. I believe he was from Jonesboro. Four-star guy that Georgia didn't offer. He's going to play with a chip on his shoulder, as well as all these other Georgia natives that play for Auburn every single year. A lot of these guys were not recruited by Georgia, didn't get an offer from Georgia, and in a couple cases were committed to Georgia. DeMarcus Riddick was a 5-star linebacker. Kayan Lee was a 4-star cornerback. They were both committed to Georgia. So there's not a lot of love that these Auburn players and really coaches and fan base have for the Dogs, but they've got some weapons at wide receiver, and if you're Jackson Arnold, you got to get it out to him quickly. So I think this is a big game for Georgia's secondary, especially being physical on the outside. They have to use the screen game to get those wide receivers involved. Occasionally they will take a shot deep, but Jackson Arnold, he does not trust that offensive line, nor should he. That is a bad group. I think they gave up 8 sacks, 9 sacks to Oklahoma, another 7 to A&M. That group has really struggled. So if you're Jackson Arnold, you want to get that ball out quickly to these receivers. It's one of the best receiving groups or receiving cores in the SEC, but you're not going to see that in the box score because they do have some trouble getting that pass game going. They're like Georgia in a way. They are a run-first team, and he can run the football, but Jeremiah Cobb is a really tough kind of big physical runner. And Damari Alston, another running back, he's from Atlanta. Georgia didn't really recruit him. He's had a nice career at Auburn so far. So they've got guys who can run the football. And then there's Jackson Arnold, the quarterback, former 5-star, signed with Oklahoma, transferred to Auburn. He is a good athlete. He can make plays with his legs. He can be dangerous there. I think he has average to above average arm talent, but he struggles with accuracy at times. I think he plays a little frantic. He's just not super polished. I don't think he's a good enough passer or a good enough quarterback to beat Georgia, especially with his arm. If they want to have a big day, he needs a big day on the ground like he did against Baylor. But things were really tough offensively for them against A&M. It wasn't a whole lot better against Oklahoma. They were terrible on third down. I think they were over 12, over 13, if my memory is correct, against A&M. So there are some real struggles with that offense. And I think Georgia's defense is good enough to where it's going to be tough for Auburn to consistently move the ball, in my opinion, and put up big points. If they do, it's because he's getting the ball vertically or on the perimeter to his wide receivers, and Georgia's secondary is having a bad day. That's the only way I can see this going down. They could get a run game going to a certain extent, but I think Georgia is going to have their way on the ground if you compare the two teams. If we're talking about which team is going to have more success on the ground, I do think that is going to be Georgia. I like Georgia's offense better. I think Gunnar Stockton's a better quarterback, so on and so on. But here's what Kirby Smart had to say about Hugh Freeze, a guy he knows very, very well. He said Coach Freeze was one of the first to really start using the run-pass option. They still use those. It maximizes your skill on the perimeter, and it forces the hand of the defense to make decisions on how you want to play the run game or the run-pass option game. Which people think is part of the pass game, but it's really an extension of the run. He loves to say that. It's one of the things that Hugh has been great at for a long, long time. Of course, you could read all of this. I'm reading these quotes. You could read them for yourself over on dawgpost.com. That's where the 5-star Georgia fans are. That's where everyone goes to get their Georgia scoop. So if you're not a member of Dawg Post, make sure you're doing that. We've got a lot of premium stories out there on the website. Some of it's free, but we do have a lot of behind the scenes insider scoop over on the website. So make sure you're checking us out there, because there's a lot we say on the site that we cannot say here on this platform. So make sure you're heading over to dawgpost.com. Here's what Kirby Smart had to say about Jackson Arnold. And I agree here. He never says that Jackson Arnold's this great passer or quarterback, but I'll let his words do the talking. He said, first thing is his athleticism. He runs like a running back. He runs over you. He runs through you. He runs around you. He's got good speed. They run gap schemes with him. They run perimeter schemes with him, and they probably they're one of the toughest. He's one of the toughest to defend when he drops back and he ends up taking off and running. So he's a weapon, and they've got weapons around him in terms of the ability to throw the ball downfield. That's something that they want to get better at. They want to be more consistent, challenging defenses vertically, and they've got the guys to do it. I don't think they've got the quarterback to do it. I think he can launch the ball. It's not like he lacks arm talent. He doesn't have elite arm strength or accuracy, but he's got enough there to where he can scramble, make plays out of the pocket, sling the ball down the field. But it feels like every time they hit a big play on offense, there's a hold, right? Or something's bringing it back. So it's an undisciplined offensive line. They can get a little handsy, a little grabby, and it takes away from a lot of the big plays I've seen them make on offense. Every time something good happens, there's a flag coming out because of the undisciplined part of the offense, and that's a big struggle of theirs too. But we talked about Auburn's effective pass rush. They've got a lot of quality players on defense. Again, they can make plays, and it kept them in that game against A&M. They can get after the quarterback, Kendrick Falk. The Crawford kid is really good. Jared Smith was a high 4-star that Georgia liked a little bit. Of course, K.N. Lee is, I think, a multi-year starter. Georgia liked him. He brings some physicality at the cornerback position. They've got good linebackers. They've got good players. I still think Georgia should be able to run on them a little bit. Marcel Reed, I thought, had a nice day passing the ball. He had some mistakes, but there were some balls where he ripped it in there and was able to make some plays through the air against that Auburn secondary. Le'Veon Moss had a really good day running the football. Oklahoma did not. I thought Auburn played really well defensively against Oklahoma, especially at times, but they get down and they have to have Jackson Arnold kind of throw them back into the game, and that's not what they want to do at all, actually. And if they get down against Georgia and ask him to drop back and start slinging it, that's when I do think you're going to see some sacks come Georgia's way and finally, right, make some consistent plays in the backfield and cause that chaos that Kirby Smart is desperately wanting and needing out of this defense. So this Auburn front can give Georgia the ability to do that and possibly have a breakout game from the front seven and maybe some of those edge defenders getting after Jackson Dart, who again can kind of play a little frantic. And if he's back there often, that offensive line is not going to hold up for very long. So we'll see. I think it's going to be a low-scoring game, but in the end, I think Georgia's run game and the playmaking ability of Gunnar Stockton making some key throws here and there will be key to them getting a tough, gritty, low-scoring win on the road. It's not going to be easy. Georgia's going to have to play well. That Auburn defense is good. They've got playmakers on offense, but they are just not clicking in all phases. They're not a consistent team. They're somewhat undisciplined. I think Georgia is just a better team right now. But we're going to talk more about this throughout the week. Thanks for watching. Hope you learned something, and I'll see you over on dawgpost.com.